We believe in unlimiting every potential, making the impossible possible. It's our passion, determination, and our purpose. Like how we pioneered unlimited streaming and unlimited data plans. U Mobile, where your unlimited potential begins.
This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
The BFM Breakfast Grill, connecting you to the top people and ideas. Presented by U Mobile.
I'm Wong Xiaoning, and this is The Breakfast Grill. The government's direct expenditure to cushion the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic via the multiple stimulus packages is as much as 65 billion ringgit. But how are we going to pay for all this? New or more taxes is an option, but perhaps long-term reform is better as a solution. So today, our panel this morning is Dr. Virenderjit Singh, Chairman of Tricor Malaysia, and Carmelo Felito, CEO for Centre for Market Education, to tell us perhaps what kind of tax reform our country should consider, especially in light of the fact that our Prime Minister says we are running out of money. With our very low tax to GDP ratio of about 11% versus the likes of Australia at close to 28% and even Thailand, our neighbour, at 18%. Dr. Virenderjit, would you say that tax reform is critical?
I think tax sustainability is the key area, and I do agree tax reforms. I now use the word tax reconstruction because nobody seems to listen to us when we talk about reforms. Yes, I certainly think is the answer, but the issue sometimes is people start worrying about new taxes. And I think you should work within the system. Maybe there's lots more we can do, doing something within the existing framework. But certainly it needs a focused approach. So I certainly agree. Yes.
And Carmelo, what do you think should be a priority in terms of our tax reform? I mean, what is actually almost to me a low-hanging fruit that we can seize at this current moment immediately?
Well, I agree that tax reform is a priority. And if I had to put a priority in the priority, I would say that enforcement is key. So it's probably the part where Malaysia is weaker, enforcement and broadening the tax base.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach, and there are many parts to tax reform. So, Dr. Virenderjit, I want to start with looking at consumption tax. In Malaysia, our track record not great. We introduced GST, and that was withdrawn. Should we reconsider this, especially since if we look at the current sales and service tax collection, it's only about 24 billion versus GST, which correct me if I'm wrong, collected 44 billion.
Yes, you're right. And I think the main thing we should be looking back at is the SST, or the sales and service tax. Actually, right now has a narrow scope. And the GST, when we introduced it, had a very broad, much broader scope. So that explains why the revenue collection was higher and the SST collection is lower. So we know there is a trend worldwide of moving towards consumption. We agreed that that's the approach for Malaysia, which is why we introduced GST. Unfortunately, politics came in, but I do think having a broad-based consumption tax is one of the approaches we must have in the context of our tax reforms or tax reconstruction. So I certainly agree there, but I think issue is many people start talking about GST coming in immediately. I don't think that is the right approach. I think the SST can be further reformed, improved, and widened in scope. And then after a few years, as we go along, we could build in the various aspects of GST within the SST, and they can call it whatever you like at that particular point in time.
But Carmelo, you're quite a fan of GST, aren't you?
Yes,
I think you've
I am.
written many articles on it. But one of the issues about GST is that, COVID-19 has exacerbated the inequality in Malaysia. So the B40s have been clearly hit the hardest. And since GST is consumption-based, lowest income earners will pay the most as a percentage of their income. So, Carmelo, is there any way to counter this?
Yeah, and in fact, I think that even before COVID-19, in a paper, I advocated for a targeted version of GST, so a multi-layer GST where basic goods are exempted, and then we have another couple of different aliquotas as we grow up in the luxury level, let's say, of the goods. So I think that is the right approach. And the bottom line, I think that the GST should be as simple as possible, because that's the best way to enforce it and to have it effective.
So if I may, the answer therefore was that if we have a small exemption list, small zero-rated list, and broad-based across all goods and services, that would be the answer. But the exemptions must be for the essentials, which is what it helps the B40 group. So that was what we introduced when GST came in. We did have unfortunately, a long list of exemptions. So when you look at the B40 group, I think they did not face so many issues. Unfortunately, in GST, it's all about types of products, right? And then certain products you have a tax, certain products you don't have a tax. So that's the challenge. And so there have been a lot of perceptions that it hits the poor. I agree with you. Regression of the regressivity of the tax is clear, and that is why we have these specific exemptions. And I do agree with Carmelo's point that we should actually have a two-tier tax rate. And that was held to be a bit too complex for us at that time. But going forward, luxury goods could be taxed at a higher consumption rate, and the rest of the goods will be at the flat rate that we have. But I certainly do agree that the GST was an easier path with the input-output mechanism, which helps you. Well, it pushes the tax all along the chain, but the problem is people take advantage, the education process wasn't clear, everybody starts increasing the prices. These are the issues. Communication is always the issue in the context of corporate Malaysia.
So, gentlemen, let's move on to corporate tax, because some would say, why not tax them more? Especially those companies which make super normal profits, like, last year was the glove manufacturers, for example. I'm just using them as an example.
Or
even technology companies. But is this self-defeating in the long term? Carmelo, what do you think? I know you love free enterprise.
Yes, we have to be very careful that the final outcome is that these companies leave Malaysia because they feel punished, and our neighbors are also very aggressive in trying to attract them. So we have to look more in the long run, and I think that also thinking in terms of extra profit is a bit misleading because it's like a moral judgment, and who is in charge to decide what is a normal profit and what is an extra profit. This draw a very dangerous ethical line, and I'm not very much in favor to attribute this ethical judgment to politicians.
We have this profit levy, the levy on the oil palm sector. We used to have in Malaysia an excess profits tax. It was all in the law, where we charged companies who were earning profits above a certain threshold, a certain amount, 5%. It used to be there in our laws, but it then eventually got, abolished because we decided to bring down our corporate rates, which was good, in line with international movements. I think a 20% flat corporate tax rate is actually an ideal rate that we should try to aim at, and our neighbors are already starting to announce this. Put aside Singapore. I mean, we cannot compare ourselves to Singapore and Hong Kong.
There's 17% for Singapore?
And all these are false comparisons. We should compare ourselves with the rest of ASEAN. And I think a 20% corporate is better. You talked about increasing tax rates. I think that's going to be negative. I thought a flat 20%. But of course, the balance between entrepreneurship and paying your fair share of taxes is a challenge. But I also want to bring one more point. Recently, Yellen, the Secretary of State in the U.S., announced a U.S. initiative to look at a global minimum tax rate of 21%.
Yeah.
Of course, that's still being negotiated. And
I'm going to be curious about the implementation of that. I think that will be the real challenge there.
Certainly.
It's a dangerous one as well.
Yeah. But 20% is my favorite rate.
So that's your Goldilocks number, is it, Dr. Virendra?
Yes.
Do you have one, Carmelo, where it doesn't, kind of suffocate private enterprise and encourages investments, both from our domestic players, and also encourage foreign direct investment? Is there a magic number?
Well, there are never magic numbers, I guess. There are only trade-offs, but I tend to agree that 20 to 25% is, in general, something that can be considered fair. In particular for businesses with a profit above a certain threshold, while the real challenge in this moment is probably to extend that payment of tax to businesses that are below threshold or that live in in the underground, and we cannot keep track of that. So
you're referring to the shadow economy, right?
Yes. But before that, if I may, the small companies in Malaysia, or SMEs, per the definition, actually pay a 17% tax on the first 600,000 of taxable profits, and then 24%. So we already have a double tier system, and maybe even for the corporates, we could look at a 20%, and then a little bit higher for higher profits.
For higher profits, yes.
And shadow economy is obviously, I think, something that we should be looking at very closely. And earlier I did say that it's not always about new taxes. It's about mining the data, the information that we have. Why are we not doing more with it? And we don't know the details about what the Inland Revenue and the Customs are doing, but Inland Revenue Board actually does have data analytics in their pipeline, and they're working on it. But shadow economy is the answer. Why are we not tackling that?
I will come to that when we talk about enforcement, because that's really one critical part.
If you allow me to add on the temptation to overtax big businesses, so let's be also careful, because the presence of big businesses in the country is beneficial not only for big businesses and for the people that they employ, but also for all the smaller businesses that are working in the chain, in the value chain of these big businesses. So they create a lot of positive spillover effects. So by punishing the big businesses, you are also penalizing the smaller businesses that are working in a functional way for the big businesses.
So we are constrained by what's happening around us. We cannot simply impose high taxes and take away excess profits when we look at what's happening around us, Vietnam and so on, all enticing
FDI. Yeah. We are not a country in a vacuum, are we? And it's about being an attractive investment destination.
And Malaysia, compared to Vietnam, Thailand, or Indonesia, is a small country with a small domestic market. So Malaysia, more than the neighbors, need to be able to attract those investments, because it cannot rely only on the domestic market. So autarkic temptations are more dangerous for Malaysia than they are for Indonesia, an example, where we have a country of 300 million people,
Yeah, and a growing middle class.
So base widening is what Carmelo is talking about. We talked about, you yourself said this. And really base widening can be done by not increasing taxes, by having more people in the net. And if the people are escaping, then what are we doing? So we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, enforcement is key. On the Breakfast Grill this morning is Dr. Virendrajit Singh, Chairman of Tricom Malaysia, and Carmelo Filito, CEO, Centre for Market Education. When we come back, should tax reform be implemented incrementally or in a big bang fashion? And either way, is there political will to do so? BFM 89.9.
You are listening to the BFM Breakfast Grill, brought to you by U Mobile.
BFM 89.9, welcome back to the Breakfast Grill. In the hot seats this morning are Dr. Virendrajit Singh, Chairman of Tricom Malaysia, and Carmelo Filito, CEO of Centre for Market Education. Just a moment ago, our panel was discussing if GST should be reintroduced, and is there a magic corporate tax rate? Now, gentlemen, some interesting suggestions so far on what we should do to reform Malaysia's taxation system. But let's talk about the enforcement. We mentioned it earlier. These are the figures, and I want to highlight some of them because they make no sense to me almost. And these are, of course, all figures that I got from 2017, and this is from the Inland Revenue Board. Only 7.8% of corporates are paying tax. 16% of Malaysians are paying individual income tax. Should I really believe these numbers, or is this a case of very clever tax planning by these companies and individuals? Dr. Virendrajit, what do you think?
As far as individuals are concerned, I think you can believe it, because the average wage levels in Malaysia are actually low. And therefore only those who cross that particular threshold, usually more than 3,000 ringgit a month or plus, are supposed to be paying taxes. So that tells you a lot about average wage structure. Secondly is about corporates. Now, if you look at the Companies Commission of Malaysia and their registrations, I think gives you a false sense that we have so many companies in Malaysia and should be thriving. I think at last count 600,000 registered entities, but many are dormant.
Okay.
And many have been registered for very simple transactions where it may not be taxable as well, because not sufficient in terms of volume or value. So actually, one of the things is that I think the numbers are correct, but there could be situations where we may not be capturing things adequately and efficiently. There are also the issue of incentives. And a lot of entities do pay a lot of incentives or rather get a lot of incentives, and their effective tax rates are much lower. So they are tax paying, but they're paying at a much lower rate, right? So that's the other part. When you talk about base broadening, you also should talk about slowly removing a number of double deductions and special deductions and so on.
So almost a simplification of our tax system.
That's it.
Is that as simple as that?
Yes, it's as simple as that. We should be actually trying that first and not worrying about what will be the impact. Because if you take away various double deductions and so on, by the way, there's a double deduction for hiring handicapped people and so on, which I think should be maintained. But there are many other little things here and there. Why do we need that? It creates complexity. So removing that and making it simpler is actually another way of building up a culture of paying taxes, which is a serious issue, I think, in this country, as well as parts of other smaller developing countries as well.
But we have this thing in Malaysia called the shadow economy. Every country has it, admittedly. But I think Malaysia's figure is quite high, as much as in the mid-20s for our GDP. Now, how do we capture that, though, in the tax system? Because, if we actually found a way to tax them, wouldn't our tax revenue increase significantly? Carmelo, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that what has been mentioned, the word incentive, is the key. So we should probably consider this year or next year like the ground zero of the incentive system and restudy it and prepare like a white paper on a new incentive structure, and an incentive structure that keeps into account not only the need that we have to attract big businesses, but also the need that we have for small businesses to emerge. And I look favorably at a reform that has been done in Indonesia recently, which target small businesses by just asking a very little percentage on their turnover. So we're talking about 1% that has been reduced now to 0.5%. So these firms don't have obligation to present the whole accounts, the costs, but just the turnover. And the amount is so small that create a negative incentive toward evasion, and at the same point allows the government to get information about the actual size or even the existence of these small businesses.
Just to interject, what Carmelo mentioned about incentives, doing a reset, that's actually in progress. From what, if we can believe the budget statements that comes out, that they are analyzing this and looking at a corporate incentive structure, and will be implementing something. But in the meantime, because of COVID, we continue to give incentives, and I'm not sure how successful we've been, but that's we can understand why we're giving, right? So incentive structure is being reviewed, and we're not sure what the outcome will be, but that's important. Second point, I agree totally with Carmelo, is this thing about small businesses. And we use the term presumptive taxation on such businesses, simply based on turnover. If your sales are 100,000, maybe 1% would be your tax, and that's it. You don't prepare accounts, you don't have to hire tax consultants or,
It doesn't become complicated or expensive, right?
This is simplification.
The taxation is even cheaper than the cost of the accountant.
Yeah. And this is simplification. And why are these things not being considered? Now, I must point out that presumptive taxation has been mentioned by many others in the past. And we were used to be given a pushback by the Ministry of Finance saying that, those are for the very low developing nations. It's not something Malaysia should be considering. And I just find myself saddened by this kind of interpretations. I think it's a good thing because that will bring in the hawkers and the various others we talk about year after year into the net in some ways. And it will help to build the culture of contributing to the nation and ultimately getting benefits from whatever we do in the country.
But then how do we encourage a culture of paying taxes in Malaysia? I mean, in Scandinavian countries where the tax rate is as high as 50%, it's accepted because the citizens see the benefits of their tax dollar reflected in social protection, healthcare, education. So, Carmelo, what do you think?
So we should also to revise, I think, the communication in terms of what Malaysia has positively achieved, because also, we have to be fair on that. So money has not only been misused. I think that a lot of good has been done.
And so, Carmelo, this issue of the COVID issue and how much we've spent and suddenly you find that our deficits is going to get widened. So then the issue becomes about how do we fill the coffers? And I think whatever said and done, we will continue to have deficits in the future. That is not a bad thing. But as long as the money is used effectively, and exactly the point that Carmelo made, we have very good level of service. We know it's going to need to be even upgraded further as the aging population comes in. So these are the issues. How do we then manage that? So it's an important point to have a good narrative. And this is where we always fail. And we talk about it, but then we forget the next minute.
There is a sort of complaining mentality, let's say. That
It's very Malaysian.
I mean, it's also very Italian. I mean, I think many countries are the same on this.
Should we consider new taxes? After all, we do hear noises of capital gains and inheritance tax. Is that a good idea, Dr. Virendrajit? I mean, it's a form of tax that appears to be an equalizer.
First things first is that we should look at existing taxes and see what we can do with it. Now, we already have a capital gains tax in the form of real property gains tax. So let's not get worked up by a capital gains tax announcement. Let's use the real property gains tax, limited as it is, and modify it over time. And then let's use our income tax structure to entice investment, to support entrepreneurship, to look at small businesses by having simplification. Let's look at our personal income tax by slowly removing the multitude of reliefs that we give everyone and lowering the threshold a little bit so that everyone, not everyone, some significant portion can come into the net. Now, all these things with simplification and a good narrative can actually bring forth quite a bit of revenue. So we haven't tried that effectively. We should do that. So before we go into inheritance taxes and a full-blown capital gains tax, we should look at this because we haven't even really employed those particular approaches.
Yeah, and I totally agree with this approach. Let's start with what we have, reform it, so no more taxes, but better taxes. I've been an advocate for a progressive capital gain tax in the past, and I still believe that a sort of progressive capital gain tax can be an anti-cyclical measure, so to help the economy to proceed with smoother business cycles. But looking at the situation in which we are now, I'm not advocating for an implementation now.
Will it kill capital markets though? Because that's one consideration, right? The capital gains tax on profit made from the sale of shares.
No, I don't think it will kill the markets. The issue is don't come in too high. You come in at a very low tax rate for those kind of transactions, or maybe don't.
Because Singapore and Hong Kong, I know you don't like to refer to them, they have no capital gains
tax.
But
they have elements of stamp duty. And that's another way that you could look at. Transaction tax could be by way of some stamp duty, brokerage fees goes up and some stamp duty comes in, there's some revenue. But it should not be as part of the full-blown capital gains tax at the moment.
At the moment.
Ultimately, it could. And but it should still be a low tax rate for some of this.
And also look at the fact that Hong Kong and Singapore are small countries in which the financial market plays an important role, while Malaysia has more an industrial backbone as well, and we should look at the possibility to incentivize actions and entrepreneurship into the real economy, into the industrial world, rather than in the capital gain market, in the capital market.
Okay, gentlemen, a lot of very useful suggestions here. But the million-dollar question or the trillion-dollar question for us is, do we have the political will to implement all that we have discussed today? I mean, taxes, a very touchy subject, and was even a rallying cry in the last general elections. Carmelo, what is your view on this?
We need a government that is presenting a tax reform as part of the manifesto, and so that the people can choose if they like or not that proposal, and eventually implement that proposal at the very beginning of the term, when you are less pressured by imminent elections.
We need a civil service which develops a plan, irrespective of the government in power, and a 10-year plan, let's say, on various tax policies or reforms. Whether you introduce it right time depends on the economic situation as well. So government should not be shy, but unfortunately they are because they worry about the elections.
It's true. It has become a weaponized tool.
Yes.
Political
Politics
weapon tool.
has entered, is obviously political. We talk about political economy in economics. And so taxation is is a political tool. And that's the unfortunate part of it. What is good for the nation sometimes gets pushed back because the politicians don't agree. So I think we need a strong government to push this through. I agree with Carmelo. Beginning of the term is a good time to introduce some good measures that may not be liked, but they are good for the country.
On that note, thank you for your time today, gentlemen. Today on The Breakfast Grill was Dr. Virendrajit Singh, Chairman of Tricom Malaysia, and Carmelo Felito, CEO for Centre for Market Education. I'm Wong Shao Ning, BFM 89.9.
The Breakfast Grill is brought to you by U Mobile, unleashing unlimited potential every day.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.